I'm making a flower pincushion and I happen to have some dance type offcuts that a friend had given me. I didn't know what to do with them, and then I suddenly thought, what about a flower pincushion? So I took a piece of fabric and put the right sides together, and I just used a sweet tin and drew around it. And then I put some pins on just to secure it because it's quite slippy fabric. So I put pins on to secure it, and being an oldie, it's not easy to fasten pins, but I managed. Then I cut it out and I sewed around it, but I left a little gap there. And once I had that, I turned it inside out. Bit of a fiddle and a faff, but we got there in the end. Then I used my scissors, gently poking it all the way around so that it got into a round shape. And then I used some wadding that I had and I pulled it away and pushed it inside, kept stuffing the little circle with more and more until I got a nice, firm, round shape. I wanted it to be like egg, flat and but tight. And then I closed that little gap up and I hand sewed it. Once I'd hand sewn it, I squeezed it all the way around to make sure it was all evenly balanced. I'm basically wanting it to be hollow kind of in the middle because that's where the button's going to go. And then I got some embroidery thread and I cut a fair length of it out because I'm going to be wrapping it round. I probably cut too much off because I ended up with a knot within a few minutes of doing this. But basically I'm pushing the needle through the middle of that circle. Got to make certain it's almost in the middle. See, I've got a bit of a knot there. Probably too much thread, as I said, because I was left out with quite a bit at the end once I'd finished. But get it through, have your knot on one end, and then I'm going to wrap that thread round and pull it through again with it, pull the needle through to the middle again. So I end up with just like a piece of thread that's going through one half section. And then I do the same on the opposite side, and I basically pull it fairly tight, and then I'm now doing it at right angles. I pull it fairly tight so that it's going to make it dint in a bit to form the petals. And then you have to make sure that you spread all the threads around. I ended up with that shape, and I keep the thread on, and then I got a button. The needle went through the button, and I'm basically going to sew this button to the flower. So the needle is actually going to go right the way through to the opposite side, and that's me pulling it through now, and then it'll go back in again. And as I do it, I pull the thread a bit more so that the button is starting to dint inwards. Not as easy to hit the hole, but we'll get there in the end. I think I'll just speed this up. This is a boring bit, so skip it if you have to. Now then, once I've got to the other side, I'm going to put the pincushion to one side and I'm going to concentrate on the bracelet. Okay, so for your bracelet part, you need to measure your wrist and add 3 centimeters. It's going to cater for the overlap and for the seams, and then mark that on your fabric. And cut it to length. For the width of this bracelet, this piece of fabric, I made it 9 centimeters wide. And then I added some iron-on interfacing, which was 1 centimeter shorter all the way around. I then pressed in about 1 centimeter on each of the long sides and 1 centimeter on the short sides. And then I folded the long sides towards each other and had the ends tucked in. Then I clipped those together, and basically I'm going to do a nice pattern stitch all the way around the bracelet. I'm going to sew along the whole of the 4 sides with the fancy stitch, but you can use a straight stitch. And there it is, that's the bracelet that I've made, and I'm checking the overlap for putting the popper on. Now I've chosen to use a popper, but you could do a button or a piece of Velcro, whichever you prefer to do. I just like doing a popper because it's so much easier. And basically I need 4 pieces, the 2 backs with the spikes on and a male and a female part. And then I make a hole on one end. It'll be quite tough because there's interfacing. You just have to push it quite hard. And then I push the spiked one through one side. And then this is the female end that goes on here and on the inside, and I use my clamp, special clamp, to clamp it shut, tight squeeze, and you've got your popper on there. Now I go to the other end and I fold it over first and press it so I can see where it's going to be, have the other popper. I make a hole and then put the male end on. And basically, as you can see, the flat end one end and the male end on the other end. You don't have 2 flat ends on the same side. So I press that on and use my clamp again to clamp it shut. And then that can now close, and that's the wristband made. Now I'm going to take the flower, and because I've still got the thread attached to it, I then find more or less the middle of the bracelet, measure it up, find the middle of the bracelet between the poppers, and I can see that that's roughly where it's going to go. Now, to make life easier for myself, I'm going to pierce 2 holes there, side by side, which would be where the button is going to go. And I'm going to come down because I've got the thread at the back of the flower, so I'm going to come down and start threading the flower backwards and forwards, going up through the top of the buttonhole on the button and then back down again. And I'll do that 2 or 3 times. Bit stiff, so I'll have to use a pair of pliers to help to pull it through. Until I've used far too much thread there because I've got far too much length, but never mind, you live and learn. As old as I am, I haven't learnt. Anyway, we finally get the thread, get it threaded on, and then finish off by doing a little double stitch at the back to hold it in place. I speeded this up because it's getting a bit tiring watching it, but there you go. That is the rose or the flower bracelet finished. pincushion. It's a bit of a shame to put pins in that, isn't it? But never mind, you could even use it as a bracelet if you wanted a bracelet. So there you go. And you will have seen at the start there was an owl, and I have also got a video coming up showing you how to make the owl pincushion. Bye. Catch you next time.